Hey everyone, welcome to another Q&A. I'm John here with Ashley, and today I think we're going to look at some questions that have come up about the difference between coaching and advising, or how to really bring coaching into academic settings. We do a lot of work with universities, and a long time ago, well, the short story of it is I started my career as a high school Latin teacher, started working with students in high school, started working with their older siblings who were in college, got connected with a couple colleges, found out what we were up to, and then asked if we could bring the coaching, bring this training into colleges and universities. And currently, about 25% of what we do is with colleges and universities. So we thought we would dedicate this Q&A to bringing coaching into those colleges and universities, and some of the common questions that we get when people first start bringing academic life coaching into colleges and universities, and then what, the ripple effects of that as it goes along. So welcome to this Q&A. But before we get in, how are you doing, Ashley? How are things? Glad you're here.
Yeah, glad to be here. It's been fun to be on these a little bit more recently. It's been a great day. So I'm excited to jump into this. I love this topic. I love the work that's being done in universities and schools and with faculty and staff. And I just get to connect with um, quite a few leaders in the universities as well as the students and or the our students, our coaches in training, going through the program, and just what academic life coaching is bringing into that space. And so I'm excited for us to connect on this. I really wish I would have had an academic life coach in college. That would have been rad.
Me too. Me too.
So one of our first questions really is like, how do you bring academic life coaching into a university setting? And then I think we can touch on what is the difference between advising and coaching with that too.
Right. So, some of the biggest stuff that we've done is with schools bringing coaching into, I'll move my mic up here, people bringing coaching to the skill sets of the advisors who are currently working with students. So I think that's the most common way that universities bring coaching into schools. I think there's a trend happening. Well, there is a trend happening in higher education where a lot of the advising departments are either rebranding or adding coaching to their services. And in the rebrand of having advisors now be, we'll call them academic coaches, I think there is there's a little tension between when an advisor is working with a student, they may only have maybe 15 to 20 minutes to work with that student. They have pretty significant caseloads, which is not unlike a student, a college counselor in a high school. And they have very specific marks that they need to hit and make sure that, a number of the students make retain a number of students. Those students need to get certain grades. So there's pressure. These are not pressureless conversations. And, what we're finding, however, and what a lot of the research suggests for students who are in schools, for them to stay in school, is that it's helpful if they have a meaningful relationship with someone who is on campus. It's one of the biggest factors of a student's retention rate and engagement. And it makes sense. If you go back to each of us go back to our college years and think about, that one or two people, professor, advisor, whoever it was, having that connection with someone on campus is a pretty significant, big deal. However, a lot of the advisors are not trained as coaches. And the big difference between advising as coaching is that an advisor gives advice and a coach gives curiosity and connection. And those are two not mutually exclusive things. And so when advising departments call themselves coaches and then say, hey, we want to take a coaching program, I think there's a little misconception on what coaching actually is. And then there's a misconception on how to bring coaching into advising, or if you have only 20 minutes, can you really do an explorative 30-minute, 50-minute coaching session that brings students to certain places? So I think that's the tension, that's the question, and that's the state of a lot of universities and colleges, with coaching. And so I think we're figuring it out slowly, but there still is we see it with participants who come from universities and are surprised that as coaches, we we address emotion, or we don't necessarily go straight to their grades or their academic performance, and that the sessions are student led. Whatever the student wants to talk about, like that's the topic. That doesn't necessarily match with the current model of advising, where the advisor has an agenda and the student goes along with that agenda. So that's the geography, and that's the lay of the land. That's where we're at. And I'm curious, Ashley, because you're, as a provost, you hear a lot of the feedback from students, and you're talking to a lot of these universities in the process of them signing up. I'm curious your thoughts as well on this topic.
Yeah, it's great to touch on this and to really, I think there's so much to dive into with this. One thing that I hear repeatedly is when coaches are coming through with the university, if they just hang in there past the
Mm.
first few weeks and they allow themselves to be curious themselves as a coach in training and to really take in what they are learning in their training, there comes a point where it just clicks and it's like, whoa, I can see how powerful this is with the student when they start to practice it and bring it into the work that they're doing. And they're seeing these connections with the students at their universities. It's a lot stronger, but also a lot more success for the student as well, in a very whole person way, not just specifically for grades like you were just mentioning. And so and there's a lot of learning that happens just as an individual going through the program. So there's growth happening even amongst the team, the advising
Mhm.
teams or the coaching team on the university, where they are understanding themselves in a different way, in a different light, and with more curiosity and growth mindset, and then operating like that with other members on the team. And so, it flows from your leadership down as well. And students in a university are going to experience that and feel and know it too when that's happening within a team dynamic too at the university. So those are some of the things that I see that are really important and powerful. But I think it's hard when you're in it, when we have this bird's eye view, because typically it's going to be
Mhm.
a few weeks into a program that you start to see the light bulb go off on, oh my goodness, okay, actually this is what I can do with this in my role.
Mhm.
And it
Yeah,
feels
it can. I mean, as an advisor, some of the feedback that we get. I mean, some of the feedback that I've received when I was leading courses is specifically with university only courses, is that there are a couple misconceptions or big surprises that they've experienced along the way. And the first, I think, surprise comes down to coaching doesn't necessarily give specific action steps or doesn't suggest specific action steps for students to take, nor are there, let's say, specific study techniques that people get trained in to deliver, academic tutoring or, academic focused mentoring. And that, going back to developing this program, there were a few interesting turns that I took in putting it together that I think now looking back, I can see why, and I can see, okay, here we are. Like, if this really is going to be the future of education, let's get into it. Thing one. So when I first started this, I was a teacher, and my job was to teach Latin to people and to have a very clear, this is step one, step two, step three, this is how this works, this is how this doesn't work, this is memorization, let's grade this. And a couple of big ahas happened to me when I first got coach trained. One was the kind of conversation that I had with a coach, and this was in my early 20s, was unlike any other conversation I've ever had at that point in my life. And part of it was that the whole conversation was focused on my internal mental emotional world. Like, what's really happening with me? And what came out of that was this, it was fairly simple, but even the exploration, even that relationship, that conversation with someone where there wasn't an outside agenda, there wasn't anything that felt like it was an older person. It wasn't like they had an agenda for me. That was a big deal. And young people, when they're in schools, there is no conversation that they're having with an adult where the adult doesn't have an agenda for them except maybe a grandparent, and then your grandparent just loves on them, say whatever like. And it reminds me of that one there was Sugata Mitra. He had that study in India where they had a computer and they let kids play with and learn what just self-directed learning. And then they had they call them cloud grannies, where they had some a person there who was trained just to acknowledge and celebrate whatever the children wanted to learn. And I thought that's really similar to a coach in some ways, someone who is there to become curious about the internal world. And so what a coach really does is a coach at their best, they take away judgment and instead they provide curiosity. And that really hit home when I was teaching, because I realized what I was doing as a teacher is I was delivering knowledge and then judging their retention of it. And as an advisor, I think what a lot of advisors do is they take in they take in the situation and then they deliver action steps. That's useful. I mean, I would love if someone came into my life and looked at everything and said, okay, here are the action steps, go. Yeah. That's lovely. Like, that's value. That is a valuable thing that needs to be there. I'm not saying let's, take that away. But coaching is fundamentally different. Mm-hmm. Coaching as in, the conception of coaching that we're talking about from the ICF, National Health Board, all those kinds of things. Like, it's fundamentally different from an advising model. Mm-hmm. And instead, the conversation is more around what's happening with you? How are you doing? What do you think would make a difference in your life? What is it you're really wanting? Those are the kind of questions that a coach will come with. Mm-hmm. Now, when we're talking, and so that involves emotion, that involves patterns of thought, that involves a lot of things that I think people in the academic world start then to feel like, ooh, is this now counseling? Is this now therapy? Is this now something that I need to go and talk to a therapist or a counselor and see, is this okay? The fundamental difference between that is a coach can address emotion. A coach can address that internal mental emotional space. The difference is that a coach does not diagnose something that's, something like, oh, you are this, or this is that pattern, or this is the malady that you're suffering, and this is the treatment this is the intervention that you need to do. There are a lot of videos, on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, that disparage coaching, that make fun of coaching. And I can understand why. I mean, there are people who call themselves coaches who are not trained. That makes sense. But there is an element where I look at those videos and think, oh, they just don't know about the coaching profession. And that's okay. I mean, I understand, I understand where they're coming from. However, the coaching profession does have a series of standards and practices that do hold validity, they hold weight. There are studies done that show the efficacy of coaching. Now, when you're as a coach and you have a question of, okay, I'm in this world, I'm dealing with emotion, I'm dealing with a client, the thing that keeps it coaching is asking your client, what do you want to do with this emotion? How is this helpful? How is this not helpful? What do you want to do with this? It's your life. These are your decisions. Where do you want to go? And that curiosity keeps it in the coaching realm. If the advisor or the helper person, gathers all that information and says, okay, this is the intervention that you now need. This is the series of steps that you need to take in your life. That's no longer in the coaching realm. That goes into the counseling realm. That goes into the therapy realm. And university staff do often have a lot of resources at their fingertips where they can contact other people in other departments and ask them, where are we with this? This is a student, I talked to them, this is what's come up. And if the leadership of the university and college is strong, those two departments will be friends. The coaching and counseling department will be friends. That's not always the case. But if the college and university leadership is strong enough to make sure that the helping professions are working together, it's a really super powerful environment for students to thrive in. And so that's my bird's eye view take on, where this started and then where it went, and then the second thing I really want to hit on is when an advisor only has maybe 20 minutes to work with a student, and they give the agenda to the student, say, well, what do you want to look at? But the advisor also has an agenda as well. That is a challenge. There's no way around it. But the biggest thing is around, if you, as an advisor, can be clear, and this is what my agenda is. These are the things that we need to talk about. This is what I'm seeing, and then shift into coaching curiosity mode. Even if you're asking just a few, let's say handful, 4 or 5 questions from coach mode, that can maybe only take 7 to 5 minutes. Those are priceless minutes for the student. And that the amount of connection that's built in that short period of time can be phenomenal. I just did a group mentor coaching session today. I led one, and I was listening to someone coach a young person. It was amazing how far she got in 7 minutes. Unbelievable. You can almost hear it in the student's voice. The appreciation for connection. And I think this is what all human beings are yearning for. We're yearning for someone to become curious about us, to take away that judgment, to substitute judgment with curiosity. And that leads to the third thing, which I think what happens eventually is then you have a culture of coaching that gets developed. And I think a great example of this is University of Oklahoma with Kathleen Shea Smith and what she's done with the leadership of OU. And there is a culture of coaching. It's percolated through leadership. We've talked about it. And it's so powerful when this happens, because the level of safety, the level of the ability for departments to work together for the benefit of students is it gets exponentially stronger. And we're seeing it in the results that they're getting and the feedback that the students are having in all of it. So those are my thoughts, Ashley. And thanks for just letting me just go and lay it out there, because this is something I care a lot about.
No, it's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. There are a few thoughts that I had, so I'm going to go back, and you kind of just touched a little bit on this again. But one of the beautiful things with coaching is it isn't trumping the value of advising. Like, there is so much beauty in advising, and life coaching is just another avenue or tool to be able to support and champion a student. And so that, I think that's the cool thing. And sometimes I think that you can feel that tension as a university participant, like, oh, I've been doing everything wrong, or I haven't been doing a good job. And that's not true. There's so much value as well in advising and in the work that has been done, I think, for students. And so I was thinking about that when you're talking about it. And with that, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, with the power of bringing in a few questions, even if it's like 5 to 7 minutes. And I would challenge university coaches, or actually all of our coaches in the community, to do that with somebody else in your class outside of class. So you have the opportunity in class to practice coaching, but you might be going over a specific tool or something like that. But take like 5 to 7 minutes and cap yourself at that, or even 10 minutes, and coach with somebody else, and allow yourself to experience the power of a few minutes of coaching. Because we've done that in some of our trainer sessions, and we all come back every time and we're like, we can't believe what 7 minutes does. And so it's just, there's so much opportunity in that, but I think there's power in experience it for yourself to be able to see, wow, like 7 minutes can make a difference. It also brought up the question of, can you marry the two, advising and coaching? And if so, how can you do that? Which I think you kind of already answered that. But let's say there is an advisor who is implementing coaching into their time with the students, but they also want to be able to give some advice. How can you do that well? Can that be done?
Right.
That kind of.
It's a great question. And what I have found to be the most useful, and what I would recommend, is to advise first and then coach second. So what that means is to give the agenda, the things that need to be done, the advice, the things that you literally see forward for the person you're working with. Put it out there right from the beginning. This is what I see. This is what I see you need to do. This is my agenda for this meeting. What are your thoughts? How do you want to make it your own? Let's look at the insight for you. Because the thing with coaching, in the session I was listening to this morning with the client, she had an interesting pattern that you could hear as a coach. We're sitting there listening to a recording, and it's all known. Like it's all permission based. Like the person knew she was being recorded, knew that we were going to be using it for this. All of this is permission based. And in listening to it, it became really clear there was a pattern you could hear for the client. And the interesting thing was asking the coach, here's a pattern we're hearing, we're seeing. Where else does this show up in the client's life? And the coach said, well, it shows up everywhere. Everywhere this shows up. And that's what we're looking for as a coach, is we're looking for an awareness of an insight, of a pattern, of something that the client needs to learn. And as coaches, our job isn't to know the answer to what the client needs to do next. Our job as a coach is to hear it and become curious about it and hold space for the client to answer it for themselves. Mm-hmm. We're not experts in action steps. We're not experts in, this is the next thing that needs to happen. No, we're just experts in curiosity, in awareness raising, and insight producing. And so these are the things that keep it in the coaching realm and avoid the, we need to be experts or have, training in a lot of mental health issues. That's not for coaches. Those are for trained counselors and therapists. And when I was coaching, in my coaching practice, there were counselors and therapists who I partnered with. And if there was ever a question I could go to and ask them, I'm working with a student, this is what's coming up. And oftentimes the counselors or therapists would say, yeah, you're fine, like continue. But there were times when they said, no, like, okay, that's outside, this is something else is going on. And then when I talked to my clients about it, parents about it, most of the time the client I was working with was also working with a therapist or working with a counselor or working with a psychologist. And it was all known, and that is best practice. It is not best practice to think that only one helping profession will solve everything, or that people only really need to work with only one, and that's it. That's not best practice. So, what I'm seeing advisors, the people I've trained, the people who go through our training program, there seems to be an initial surprise, I think, around the misconception of what coaching is and isn't. I think a lot of people come into it thinking, I'm just going to get like even more knowledge to impart to the students I work with on how they can study better or how they can motivate themselves better, how they can do this better. But the thing about coaching, the beautiful thing about coaching when I was working with students, is I found very quickly it wasn't as much about the knowledge or the ideas of growth mindset, fixed mindset, different motivation styles, different strengths, and understanding of internal worlds and those kinds of things. These are all important. And it's not as much giving information or giving tools as much as it's about becoming curious and helping students take stuff away. That coaching is as much about taking away limiting beliefs, disempowering perspectives, dealing with inner critics, all of those kind of things. And human beings are naturally creative and resourceful. And when we tap into that as coaches, you can trust your client's brilliance. You can trust your own brilliance, your own instincts as a coach. And this to me is, the experience when advisors, anyone going through coach training, myself included, when I experienced it myself, it was one of the best experiences I've ever had personally, professionally, in growth. And that truly is what coaching offers. It's a path, it's an avenue for that. I think that addresses it. I think that gets there, or at least starts this conversation. Yeah. And we'll create more content and videos around, the difference, academic life coaching and, the difference between coaching and counseling. We'll talk to therapists and counselors too and get their thoughts on this, but at least this is a beginning, maybe a place for a resource for people to get to.
This is great, John. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you, Ashley. I feel like, and so for all the community, Ashley is our provost. She's the one who holds it down with the trainers, the scheduling, the working with universities and courses, and making sure that the back end is still functioning as smoothly, and doing the accreditations through the ICF, the Health Board, and through Oregon, the U.S. Department of Education. Ashley is awesome. So for those of you, if you haven't, there she is. Thanks, Ashley. And thanks everybody for watching and listening for these things. I really enjoy making them.
This is so good. This was so good. This reminds me of just when I first heard about coach training EDU, because academic life coaching was the main focus. And so it's just like bringing me back like 9 or 10 years ago of just like, I don't know, I can just the passion and the heart and everything. And so this gave me just like another boost of energy for today too. Just like, let's go, like, let's get off of here and bust this out. So thank you, John. This was awesome.
It's super cool. I really feel very grateful for this work and grateful to be in this space and this team. And I think that the world is changing. The world is changing. Knowledge is at our fingertips. The most valuable stuff is the self-awareness and understanding your own inner mental, emotional space and what you're able to produce. And I feel like coaching is exactly suited to help young people and old people, help people in general figure that out and explore it in safe ways. So here we are. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.